Welcome to Retire to a Life You Love with Michelle Gessner from Gessner Wealth Strategies. We inspire executives, professionals, and business-savvy women to better their finances and overcome the financial stresses of life. We do all of this by giving the advice you need to identify your goals and the confidence to achieve them, so you can retire to a life you love. Join us for this journey where we explore ways to win financially as Michelle draws from years of expertise and talks with today's top business minds about their wins, failures, and best practices.
Hello and welcome to the Retire to a Life You Love podcast with your host, Michelle Gessner. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Wendy. How are you today?
I'm good. It's a very exciting day, isn't it?
It is. It is. I am so excited because today we have a special guest. And before I introduce her and the topic, what I want to just mention is we've been talking about all things financial, getting yourself ready for retirement and making sure that your finances are in order and all of that it entails. But today we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what you are retiring to. So your actual life in retirement, how what it should look like, what you want it to look like. And we are talking today to Glenda Cole, who has crafted what she calls, in her own words, her storybook life in retirement. So Glenda comes to us right now from Portugal. She lives in Portugal. She's an American. She had a very robust career as the vice president of marketing and sponsorship for a U.S. developer of luxury shopping malls. She had this high-powered career managing people. I think she said 100 professionals with a big budget of $60 million. She was very busy. And when she chose to retire, she chose Portugal. And now she's got a beautiful life. And so we've got lots of questions for her about how she did that and what she does in Portugal and what her life looks like. And I also want to add before I bring her in here, she currently writes content and appears as a speaker for International Living magazine. So welcome, Glenda Cole.
Thank you, Michelle. I am so pleased to be here. I'm always happy to ramble on and on about my storybook life.
Well, we are excited. We want to hear all about it. We've got a ton of questions. So I think the first thing we want to know is, can you tell us your story as to why you chose to move to Portugal?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, but it started with the love of travel, certainly. And I was traveling extensively for work. For that high-powered job, I was traveling all over domestic U.S., Hawaii, Puerto Rico. I was spending a lot of time changing time zones. And crazily enough, I did that all year. And then for my vacations, I would travel again and go to exotic, fun adventure trips with friends and with my son all over the world. And about 5 years before I was thinking, I think I'm about 5 years away from retirement, I thought, how am I going to pick? The plan was, maybe I was going to sell everything but my boat. And I was going to live on the boat in Michigan in the summer. And then, of course, you're not going to live on a boat in Michigan in the winter. So I was going to go somewhere lovely, fabulous, with warm weather in an exotic location. And how do I pick this spot in the world? So International Living magazine that I now write for, at that time I was an avid reader. And they do an annual retirement index where they rank countries based on sort of a number of variables. So, spreadsheet nerd that I am, I created my own version of that. I weighted variables that were most important to me. And lo and behold, 5 countries popped out. And they were Malta, Panama, the south of Spain, Costa del Sol, the Algarve in Portugal, the southern coast, and Costa Rica. So I embarked on a 5-year adventure to visit those countries and see if, one of them became the paradise that I wanted to live in. And I could only go, my son went with me and he was in med school year round. So we only had holidays. So every Christmas and New Year's for 4 years, we did Malta, Panama, south of Spain. We came here to Portugal and we never made it to Costa Rica. I fell in love with Portugal.
Wow. And you had your sights set on an international lifestyle just because of your exposure to International Living magazine. And also to
And
get away from the winters, maybe, of Michigan?
yes, definitely get away for the winters, which I certainly could have done in Florida, but I really loved the lifestyle of Europe. And I'd done a lot of trips to Europe with friends and my son. And there's something about living in Europe that is calming and relaxing. And Lord knows the stress of the job, I needed to escape a little bit. And 5 years later, I thought, wow, it was even tougher than when I first started. The stress was growing on every front in the US, it felt like. So I really needed this escape. So I embarked on my trips, which were a riot in and of themselves, but Portugal was paradise.
So I want to ask you a few questions about how, but before we get into all that, can you tell us specifically what you enjoy the most about living there? You mentioned the European lifestyle and specifically Portugal. So help us understand that a little bit.
It's always a tough question to answer, Michelle, because it's such a big answer. And it sounds a little corny to say this, because when I put it all together about, oh yeah, there's the cost of living and the weather and the bottom line is I'm happier here and people are happier here, which sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a Disney movie, but it is true. When I go back home, I spend August back in the States, and I'm always struck by the sort of ugly resting face in the US versus in Portugal. People are stressed. You can see it in their faces. People are just rushing around and having to, and when in Portugal, it's laid back. People are smiling. Strangers wave hello. It sounds like maybe RFD, but it is so true. It's just a different way of life. And it's hard to encapsulate in what I love the most, because I can live so well here on the cost of living that's certainly a big part of why I'm smiling every day. But in general, it's because I'm happier every single day of my life.
So let's talk about the cost of living. I know that our listeners are probably thinking, well, it's probably expensive over there, but you just said the cost of living is lower. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? How expensive is it to live there?
Yes, I have done a lot of research. Not, of course, I live, so I know what I pay every day, but I've done a lot of research on different lifestyles for International Living Magazine. I talked about them at the Denver conference. And the truth is, it's one of the few countries I think you can live well on your Social Security here. Now, that would mean a different life than the one I live. That would mean you'd probably live in a city here. You wouldn't own a car. You'd use transportation, public transportation. You would go on the national healthcare system, which is free and good. You would be long waits. And so that kind of lifestyle, you literally can live pretty well and a very European lifestyle for about $30,000 a year. Now you take that up the spectrum and I have a stunning villa on a golf course. I look out every day at the rolling hills and the ocean and think, I can't believe I live here. I'd be living in the servants' quarters if I was in the US. And I have a gardener and I have a pool boy and of course I pay what we would call an HOA to live on a golf course. And that's sort of the very upper end lifestyle. And you can do that here for about 75,000 US dollars a year. So
Wow.
it's incredible to live like this. As I said, I could never live like this in the US.
I know you have some videos that give a tour of your house and some other things that you talk about in more detail. And we'll be sure to mention how people can get in touch with you and see those videos at the end of our episode here. But I do want to ask you about what you like the least, because it can't be all perfect, right? I mean, there's got to be
Right.
something. What do you like the least? What adjustments have you had to make?
Okay, so yes, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. It's mostly unicorns and rainbows. But I will tell you the one thing that drives me nuts here is I could never work for a living here because there is no sense of deadline. Part of that laid back lifestyle comes with people don't answer the phone. People don't respond to an email. Deadlines, my handyman shows up when it's not raining and the stars align. And it's a different thing. And tie that in with bureaucracy now when you need to get something done through the government. And you just have to take a chill pill. It is really tough to think I'm calling the immigration office and they hang up on me. Don't they want to speak to people for immigrants? So it can be very frustrating on that end. But I will tell you what, given that's one factor, and that's sort of the flip side of that is why it's so wonderful to live here and relaxing and lovely, that you just got to say, I got to put my Americanness on hold. I've talked to other Americans who've moved here and they feel the same way. Everything else is so magnificent. The food, the over 300 days of sunshine a year, the spectacular views, the people, the lifestyle. It's well worth dealing with some bureaucrats that make you crazy.
So you live in the little town of Lagos, which is on the southern coast of Portugal, which is called the Algarve. Is that, do I have
Correct.
that right?
I'm actually, you're close. I'm about 15 minutes outside of Lagos in an even tinier town called Budenge. I'm in Lagos pretty much every day, though. Lagos is the big city. It's a small town, but it has everything in it. It's got every restaurant you could want, every genre of food, and it's all spectacular. There are a number of terrific grocery stores. There's some retail. It is just a charming, charming place to live.
And
Can I
you,
ask a question?
oh yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
So do they have like Red Lobster or like when you say every kind of restaurant? I'm just curious.
Thank God they don't have Red Lobster because the seafood here is so much better. But yes, they have the equivalent of Red Lobster is every little corner restaurant here, only about 1,000 times better with seafood. So you can go to a fish market where they literally are catching it and hauling it out that day. There are a couple of restaurants here that if you call the day before, they have a number of dishes. Like one of my favorite is monkfish stew. They make this incredible monkfish stew. You can call the day ahead and they ask their fishermen to fish for it the next day for you. So
Wow.
believe me when I say Red Lobster, forget it, never again.
Oh, so they don't have the chains and stuff that you're, referring to, but it's better. I get it.
Now, I will say that once in a while, you jones for a little something like a double cheeseburger at McDonald's, and they do have McDonald's in Lagos.
Of course they do. McDonald's is everywhere.
There is one McDonald's in Lagos, and every once in a while, I've got to make the trip.
So tell me how long you've lived there. When did you arrive in Portugal?
So I did the first thing, which was the experiment of living here in the winters and on my boat in the summers. I initially started that way, and I did 3 winters here. And now I've been here, and then it got to the point where I didn't want to go home. So I've now been 2 years here permanently. In fact, just last week was 2 years.
Wow. Okay. So what do you do with your time there? What's your lifestyle look like? Do you have friends? What do you do?
So it's a blast. So I do whatever I want. The truth is, when I was first here and I didn't know a lot of people, every Thursday I picked up this newspaper at the Portugal Resident, and they list all the crazy fun things to do in the entire southern coast, from the sausage festival and the sweet potato festival and every market that's happening, the farmers markets, the live music shows, the cultural center in Lagos has all these things there. So initially I did a lot of those one-off fun, and I still do quite a bit of that. But when you're here full time and you start making friends, now I'm always saying, trying to fit someone in, let's go to dinner, let's go to lunch, let's take a walk on the cliffs. There is the most stunning, this entire coast is filled with cliffs overlooking the ocean, and they have boardwalks and these beautiful fields of flowers. It's truly like a storybook. And one of the most beautiful ones is Ponte Piedad, and it's literally a 10-minute drive from my house. So I walk there occasionally, meet friends to walk there, and then of course explore all these wonderful, incredibly cheap, incredibly good restaurants. My boyfriend Glenn plays tennis several times a week. We've made a ton of friends there. We live on a golf course, but we don't play golf. A lot of people golf here. The Algarve is known throughout Europe as a kind of the year-round place you can play golf. So there's a ton of beautiful courses, one of which I live on. And I will say I joined the Casa Social Club, and for a while I was the social secretary. I filled in for someone who was on break, and I taught Hawaiian dancing at a luau, and I planned a wine tasting. And they've asked me to do those things again, even though I'm not the social secretary anymore. So I'm going to do those every year. I just started a couple months ago volunteering for an organization called Madrugada. They provide hospice, end of life care here, completely for free, and the equipment, all the equipment you need. But I don't volunteer in hospice. I volunteer in their retail stores. That's how they have 4 stores here. That's how they raise money to provide free hospice throughout the Algarve. It's a tremendous organization. I'm really enjoying that. I also write for the local paper, the Portugal Resident, that I used to read. I have a monthly column there. And I'm still doing I thought I retired. I don't know how this happened, but I'm still doing all those projects you mentioned for international living. We have actually, it's sold out, but we have a conference coming up in the Algarve, the first one ever through International Living, and I'm going to be speaking at that for them.
Hi, it's Michelle. Do you want some more information about some of the topics we've been discussing? I've got good news. After teaching in-person classes on retirement planning for years at local community colleges, I've put together some webinars you can listen to in the comfort of your own home on various topics such as estate planning, avoiding tax pitfalls in retirement, and various other topics. Reach out to us for the webinar replays, and we would be happy to send them to you. You can find all of my contact information, including my social channels, in today's show notes. Now let's get back to today's episode. So it sounds like you don't have to speak Portuguese. I think people
No.
are probably wondering about that. Are you surrounded with English speakers, or what's the language barrier?
So I said I thought there would be this huge Portuguese language barrier. The Portuguese all speak English. Any language barrier is the Brits. So I've learned lots of things like bits and bobs and all of those lovely British, you're brilliant in all the British things. I even wrote an article about translating American to English. Honestly, it's tough to get someone to answer you in Portuguese. I try to practice my fledgling Portuguese. So you can be in the grocery store. I walk up and say, bom dia, to practice my Portuguese. And someone says, how you doing? Back to me, the Portuguese person at the register. So it is difficult to even practice here because it's so well spoken throughout the Algarve. The Brits have been retiring here for generations. So everyone speaks English. They teach it very young in all the school systems. And in a big city, if you decide on city living or certainly the Algarve, you don't need, frankly, a word of Portuguese. If you want to live in the countryside and, raise goats, you're probably going to need some Portuguese. But other than that, honestly, you don't need it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of international folks in your area, Americans, British. Would that be a fair statement?
Oh my gosh, yes. We have British friends. We have Irish friends. There are Swedish friends. Our neighbors are German. It is a really eclectic mix of people. And the thing we all have in common that really binds us together is how much we love this life. It's amazing how no matter what walk of life or where people are from, we all are just bonded in our love of the lifestyle we live.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. So can you talk a little bit about how difficult it is and I don't want to get into the weeds because I know there's a lot of bits and pieces, but in general, how difficult is it to get the visa that you need to live there?
Right. So you need a residency visa to live here. And the toughest part is when you're in the States, you have to apply for it before you come here, and you have to get a 4-month long stay visa. And then once you're in Portugal, you go for your 2 years. And there's a website, what is it? VFSglobal.com. They have a checklist of all the things you need to put together. And you need things like you have to have proof of income, that you're not going, obviously Social Security qualifies. It's so low, it's absurd. You have to show that you have a place to live. So you have to have a place rented for 4 months before you come to Portugal, which is easy to do. So you need to put all those things together. You need to have an FBI check and it takes, frankly, I leave myself 90 days. Once you do that in the US and get all that together and you get in your passport, they put a visa. On that visa is I didn't know it, which is why I always tell people there's a little tiny type that tells you they've already made an appointment for you in Portugal. So once you make that appointment, I was loaded for bear. I had every possible folder. I was ready to go. I walked in 20 minutes later, some fingerprints. I had my 2-year visa. It was very simple once I was in Portugal, and I just renewed it last week for another 2 years. And then you go for a final year, a 5th year, and then you can choose to either go for your passport or you can go for your permanent residency. The way things are going, so you do have to speak the language for a passport. And I was prepared to take a year solid course beforehand and try to cram it in and speak enough Portuguese to get the passport. But I've recently learned that and gotten myself off the hook because I think, given the tax situation, I will prefer to stay a permanent resident here.
Yeah, and you're referring to I'm not sure what the official word is, but maybe repeal of the NHR, non-habitual residency tax scheme or program. Is that what you're talking about? That's no longer going to be an advantage for Americans living in Portugal?
Actually, no, I wasn't speaking about that, but I can tell you that they had such an uproar over it. They've extended it for 1 more year. So, and it's well worth doing. However, what I was speaking of is if you choose to become a citizen and get a Portuguese passport, you will then become liable for all of your taxes to be paid here instead of the US. And this is a socialist country where medical is free for a lot of people. So you would be paying staggering amounts of income tax versus what you pay in US. Because my income is in US, I basically, knock on wood, they don't have a double taxation. So I don't have to pay here, other than I rent the villa in the summer for July and August, and I pay Portuguese taxes on that, and that's it.
Okay. All right. And that just for our listeners, and again, I don't want to get into too much detail, but what people like about living in Portugal is, I mean, among the many things you just talked about, but you don't get that. You have a sort of a tax holiday for 10 years. Is that the way you would describe the NHR?
Yeah, I think tax holiday is a good way to put it. It's I don't want to get in the weeds either, but it is 10 years where you don't pay capital gains other than US. It's a very good thing.
Okay, but unfortunately, that program is on the chopping block after 2024, but folks like yourself are grandfathered in for 10 years, and then and here's the thing, you kind of have to sit down and do the math, because it sounds like the cost of living there is a lot less. Certainly the cost of medical care, certainly going out to eat and things like that. So I don't know how it would all shake out if one of our listeners wanted to move to, say, Portugal and live the storybook life, but they don't get to enjoy that 10-year tax holiday that's eventually going to go away. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like.
Rumor has it, and obviously don't hold me to it because the government changes all the time their minds, but rumor has it that, like the Brits, what happened to the Brits is they didn't used to pay anything on their pensions, as they call it, and they now are paying 10%. So they're predicting that after next year, Americans will start paying 10% of their Social Security. So, and hopefully you wouldn't double pay. So we'll see how it works out. The other thing is, I'm not so sure that Portugal won't reverse themselves again after this next year and extend the regime for another who knows how many years. I think they're going to struggle, as the rest of the world is. We're just seeing the tipping point on inflation and some other things in Europe as well. So I think there's a good chance they might extend it. But if there's any chance you can, that's the advice they give everyone. Not just because of the NHR scheme for next year, but I should have done 2 years earlier than I did. I should have gone, and you just never know. You never think you have enough money. You never think it's the right moment. And now's the time. Just do it.
Yeah. And I know that each European country is different. The culture in Portugal, it sounds like it's very friendly. Everyone is open, and it's easy to talk to people and make friends. That may not be the case, say, in France or another country. I lived myself for 4 years in Belgium, so I spent a little time near that French culture and in the Belgian culture, and I don't think it's at all like what you described in Portugal. So I know that everything is different.
Well, and I think you can find little expat communities, which is part of I have friends that lived in Brittany for many years in France, and they absolutely loved it. I said, "Oh, how are the neighbors?" They're not French. So there are expat communities throughout Europe of different, like there are here in the Algarve, an enclave of expats that all bond and get along very well. So I love France. But it's not as easy. It's not just that the people aren't as welcoming, seriously, and that you do need to lose, although I do speak some French. I think Portugal is easier the visa is easier, the people are welcoming, the language is, not an issue. So it's just easy all the way around and a beautiful place to live.
Now, do you ever feel like you miss seeing some of your old friends, or maybe, I don't know if you have grandchildren or other family members? I know you have a son that lives, and I think he lives in the US. Do you ever miss or seeing some of the folks that are back in the States?
Yes. I mean, that is always painful, right? That was part of the reason why I was going to just go part of the year back and forth. And then I realized I'm talking to my son more in Portugal than I was in the US. He's in California, and the time difference is always an issue. But with WhatsApp, it's changed my life. And I think he misses me more now that I'm farther away across the ocean for some reason instead of across the country. So we talk more often, and it is difficult not seeing him, especially difficult, of course, at the holidays. I go back every August. I see him. I see my friends. He usually comes. I very cleverly this year scored Taylor Swift tickets in Lisbon. So I've got him hooked coming this spring. So I find ways to get him here somehow once a year, and then I see him once a year. I have other friends that live here, other Americans. They go back more often than I do, but I stay quite a long time when I go. So they have grandkids, so they do go back more often. And once again, they're saying we're not the grandparents that are going to raise the grandkids. If I ever have any, I plan to be the cool grandma that lives in Portugal, and they go visit and you can jump in the pool. And some other grandma can take them every day and watch them.
And I bet that you have friends you didn't even know you had that all of a sudden are your friends because they want to visit you in Portugal. Is that a phenomenon?
Yes. The best part is friends of friends, right? We weren't here very long, and I got a call from a friend who said, and I thought, oh my God, she's coming to see me. I'm so thrilled. She goes, I've got some friends that are coming through. Can they stay with you? 3 guys, friends of hers. Like, oh, sure. I'd never met them. They turned out to be great, and we had a wonderful time. But yes, Portugal, everybody wants to see. Had tons of friends come to visit. I've got 3 groups coming this spring, and another set coming the following months, 4 groups coming this spring. So yes, certainly when you're first here, I think a lot of your friends will show up, and it's such a beautiful place. I've got friends coming back this year for the 2nd time.
So you sound rested and healthy and happy, and you probably are doing more walking than you ever did. So if someone is looking to have your lifestyle, wants to maybe move to Portugal, do you have any advice for them on how they can get started in doing the research?
Well, of course, they can watch my podcast, not my podcast. I'm sorry. You have a podcast. They can watch my YouTube channel, which is the Glenn and Glenda Show. You can easily find it. And I give tips on, very specific, the weeds on the visa, how to buy a home. I think a lot of people ask me about rent or buy, and there is a terrific website, and you can look for either. It's called Idealista, just ideal, IDEALISTA.com. And you can put rent or buy, and you can, just like you can Zillow at home, you can draw a map, or you can pick an area and move it all over. They're all over Portugal and Spain, actually. That's how I found the villa. That I looked at so many places online. Real estate works very differently here, so you want to do a lot of your own research. So I would say, obviously, too, one mistake people made, I think people make this often, and they think they're going to do a 2-week whirlwind tour of all of Portugal. I'm going to spend 3 days in Lisbon and 3 days up north in Braga, and I'm going to spend 2 days in Porto, and then I'm going to go to the Alentejo in the central area, and then I'm going to spend a few days in the Algarve. And when I come home after 2 weeks, I'm going to decide where I want to live for the rest of my life. That's a mistake, right? So rent. So my advice is there are super cheap rentals you can find here, particularly in the winter season. Summer can be more expensive because that's when all the Europeans flood to the Algarve. It's such a beautiful place for vacation. Come in the winter, find a way to stay a month or two. And I say, look, don't do get a beautiful 5-star hotel and stay with all the tourists. Get an Airbnb in a neighborhood, go get your hair done, talk to the hairdresser, go shopping, cook, get a place with a kitchen, live like a local, go have a pastel de nata, the little pastry, and a coffee at the local coffee shop. Get to know some of the people on the block. I think you'll be sold on Portugal, but if you're not, you'll know it much better that way than the 2-week whirlwind tour of hotels here.
Yeah. And also, that's good advice for wherever you might want to retire. I tell my clients all the time, if you think you want to move to whatever, Washington or Oregon or wherever you want to go, and you haven't lived there before, or even if it's just a town not far from your hometown, you have to live there for a bit, maybe rent for 6 months before you pull the trigger, because you may find that it's not all that you thought, or you would rather live in that neighborhood and not the one that you thought you wanted to live in.
Yes, and you can do 3 months you don't need anything, right? You just need your American passport. You don't need any special visa. So you can stay 3 months at a time anywhere in Europe in the Schengen area. And I did a lot of that. So it's easy to do, simple to get a rental overseas before you show up, and just live like a local.
Very good advice. Very good advice. Okay. So you briefly mentioned it, but if people want to watch your videos, follow you, get your content, learn more, how can they get in touch with you?
Thank you, Michelle. There are a couple of ways. One is you can watch our YouTube channel, the Glenn and Glenda Show. Yes, my boyfriend's name is Glenn and my name is Glenda, and that's easy to find on YouTube. You can also go to International Living TV, which is a YouTube channel. I've done a number of episodes for them about Portugal, and they have, of course, episodes from other people in other countries all over Europe and all over the world. That's always fun to watch. You can also email me if you'd like. I respond to a lot of people, probably better there than on the YouTube. It's hard to keep up. So my email, if you don't mind me giving it, is Glenda F as in Faye, Glenda F Cole, Cole, at yahoo.com. And I will try to answer any and all comers, because as I said, I love to share this place. And I'm finding that the kinds of Americans who are coming to live here are the fun, adventurous spirits that I enjoy as well. So come on.
That's very, very generous of you. I'm one of the things that struck me about you is how approachable you are. It's very nice of you to offer your help. I think there are a lot of people that would love to have the lifestyle that you have, but they don't know where to start. So you got to start somewhere. And the content that you've put out is phenomenal. So we appreciate so much your coming on today and sharing a little bit of your slice of heaven.
Thank you. Like I say, I'd love to share my storybook life.
Thank you.
Well, and now, Michelle and I probably should be considered friends, and we will be booking time to come and stay.
Please, there's 4 bedrooms in the villa. You can have a couple of them.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, Michelle. So how can people get in touch with you if they have more questions?
Yeah. So if anyone has questions, you can reach me. And probably the best way to find us is GessnerWealthStrategies.com, where you can see the contact information quite easily and reach out.
Well, thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to Retire to a Life You Love with Michelle Gessner from Gessner Wealth Strategies. We hope you were inspired to take steps to your financial freedom as you learned new techniques and strategies for managing your finances. To learn more about how you can improve your financial landscape, visit our website at www.gessnerwealthstrategies.com. That's GESSNER wealthstrategies.com. Or give Michelle and her team a call at 713-589-6448. And don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes are available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Michelle Gessner or Gessner Wealth Strategies. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.